Hi, this is Dr. Georgia. I hope you find today's message a blessing in your life. We want to make sure that we continue to provide these video messages for you when you can't come to church, or for those of you who live in a different state, or we noticed recently we have a lot of people in even different countries who are tuning in. So if that is you and you can donate to us, we invite you to hit that donate button just below the message here. So thanks so much.
Let us prepare ourselves. If you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
And now just over your heart and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of success. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of success. Well, Reverend Georgia, if that's true, how do we use failure to be more successful than we already are? Because I know you're already successful in this church, but we can use it to be even more successful. The answer is this: we get braver. We get braver about seeing our failures and looking at the emotions that we have that are connected to those failures, and knowing that with honesty and with commitment, we can come out of that failure even stronger than if we never had the failure in the first place. I'm starting a series with a little book called Rising Strong by one of my favorite authors, Brene Brown. Now, a lot of people if you were to go to a bookstore and look for Brene Brown's work, you would find this in the self-help section. But you know, I don't call her a self-help author. I call her a self-mastery author, because I think what her work does is to help us bring us back into connection with that divine presence that is available to us all of the time. That divine presence that then takes us back to our natural state, which is that we are whole, perfect, and complete, just as we are right this second. Doesn't mean that there might not be some subtractions, but there are no additions to make you whole, perfect, and complete. You are that right now. If you're visiting today, Ernest Holmes says this. He says there's nothing to heal but more God to be revealed. Nothing to heal, only more God to be revealed. Now here's the thing, if you're visiting today, what you want to know is that I'm not talking about a God in the sky. I'm talking about an essence that is available for everybody, that is around all of us, in us, and through us, all of the time. The innermost God and the highest God are the same God. Now here is the thing, it's accessible to everybody. If you're a Muslim, it's accessible. If you're a Catholic, it's accessible. If you're a Hindu, it's accessible. If you're a Christian, a Jew, it's accessible. If you're a person who just goes out into nature and looks around, you will find it there too. Because it's everybody. It doesn't matter on what path you take the outer. What's important is what comes from the inner. And what comes from the inner must be honesty. No matter what path you take, you have to have honesty inside of there. We have to get comfortable with being more vulnerable in our life, and that's not always easy. A client asked Brene Brown, what's the upside of being more vulnerable in our life? And she said the upside is that you will have more joy in your life. You'll have more love in your life. You will feel a sense of belonging that you never felt before if you can become more vulnerable in your life. He said, well, what's the downside? The downside is that you're going to fall down. The downside is you're going to get kicked in the ass. That's the downside. But you know, when you stop to think about it, if getting kicked in the ass and falling down is what will take us to feeling more belonging in the world, isn't it worth it? Isn't it worth it? Because we know we can get back up. We've done it a million times. There's not a person in this room this morning, not one person in this sanctuary that hasn't fallen down and gotten back up, or you wouldn't be here today. We've all done that. You know, she writes a great thing in here about explaining about vulnerability and staying on the survival path. If we're going to put ourselves out there and love with all of our whole hearts, we're going to experience heartbreak. If we're going to try new, innovative things, we're going to fail. If we're going to risk caring and engaging, we're going to experience disappointment. It doesn't matter if our hurt is caused by a painful breakup or we're struggling with something smaller like an offhand comment by a colleague or an argument with an in-law. If we can learn how to feel our way through these experiences and know and own our stories of struggle, we can write our own brave endings. And when we write our own stories, we avoid being trapped as characters in stories somebody else is telling about us. You know, when we allow somebody else to tell our story through their mind, through their lens, through their experience, that's when we can very quickly become victims in our life. Have you ever called a friend and you were just telling your story, you were telling what happened, and because they had a similar experience, the outcome was so dismal looking, and we became victims to their story, not our own story, because we were letting somebody else tell it in our life. But here's the thing about falling down. It hurts. It hurts. Falling hurts. Tennyson, you remember that famous quote, "It is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." And while I think that's true wisdom, we can't be too glib about it. We can't turn that into some sort of a happy soundbite in our life, because falling down hurts. Heartbreak kicks the wind right out of yourself. Learning to trust again after a fall can be a monumental task, but it's doable in our life. We love falling down and getting up stories, don't we? We love that. All movies are made, falling down, getting up, falling down, getting up, falling down, getting up. We love that. And they're really very powerful. But the problem is that sometimes we move too quickly through the falling down part before we get to the getting up part, to the redemptive part. We forget to celebrate and sometimes even acknowledge that we had fear when we fell down, that we had fear and we moved through it. And any of you who have consciously moved through fear, who said, ooh, this hurts, but I'm going to move through it. Don't you know how good that feels when you're on the other side and you actually moved through it in your life? But see, here's the thing. We have to be careful not to get to the other side too quickly in our life. You know, we like to get to the part of the story where we have a new job, and we forget the pain of getting fired from the old job. We love the part of the story where this is my new partner and life is great. And we forget what happened when we got dumped the last time in our life. See, in the book, Brown says this. She says, to strip failure of its emotional consequence is to scrub the concepts of grit and resilience away. Of the very qualities. To strip them from the very qualities that make them so important. Toughness, doggedness, perseverance in our life. See, I belong to a recovery community, and I was told very early on, bring the message, leave the mess. And if we're not careful, that's great wisdom for a meeting. And nobody in that program ever meant that I shouldn't share my mess. It meant not do it in the meeting. But it didn't mean that I shouldn't find a sponsor or a clergy or a practitioner or a best friend that I can share my mess with. It's critical that we do that. Those of us who are in New Thought, we consider ourselves positive spirituality. In fact, that's what I tell parents when they say, what do you teach our children? I say we teach them positive spirituality. But make no mistake, that does not mean shove down your emotions. That does not mean shove down the pain that you're feeling if you're in a falling down time in your life. In this church, our practitioners wrap their arms around you if you're falling down. We'll stay with you until you can rise strong, but we won't tell you that your feelings don't matter. We're not going to do that because it's a mistake to do that. See, here is the thing. Messes left unattended tend to get pregnant, and they have baby messes. And those baby messes grow into be giant, big old messes in our life. We've got to make sure we're dealing, we've got to acknowledge them and feel the feelings around failure. Now, it doesn't mean that you allow it to define you. I love, I actually took part of today's affirmation from this idea that she writes about, that our work is to choose to feel disappointed, not live disappointed. And you know, you all have somebody in your family who's just living disappointed. Things aren't good. Oh, they got dumped 40 years ago and they're still dealing with it, aren't they? And we want to say, let it go now. Feel it, and then let it go. Brown says that, calls those who are comfortable and vulnerable as they rise. She has a name for those people who are vulnerable, know their vulnerability, feel their feelings, share their feelings, and then begin the rise. She calls those people badasses. Badasses. Now I thought, oh, Georgia, you're a minister, clean it up. Get it right for Sunday. Just say they're brave people. No, I'm not going to say they're brave people. They're badasses. They're badasses. Because it's hard to do when we're hit. Folks who fall down and they say, damn, this hurts. But this is important to me, so I'm going to go forward and do it again. Jesus modeled this when he at the cross said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? That was his vulnerable moment that he shared. He shared that with us. He could have kept it quiet. But he knew the power. He knew that that part of understanding his vulnerability was part of his resurrection. And that's true for us. Sharing, understanding, feeling our vulnerability is part of our resurrection in our life. Badasses are the people who are transgender people who are saying, you know what, this is scary stuff I'm doing. I don't want to hurt my family. I don't want to be scared when I'm walking down the street. But you know what? I've got to do this anyway. Yesterday I did a funeral, and while we were having the repast, I heard an uncle talk to his 4-year-old nephew. And the little boy was saying, why is everybody crying? And the uncle, God love him, is a badass. And he said, the reason they're crying is because we cry when we're sad. I cry when I'm sad, he said. See, we're raising a whole generation, new generation of men. And that guy did a great thing right there. He understood that you have to look at your vulnerability, you have to feel your vulnerability, you have to share it and see it. Every one of us have an opportunity to do that in our life. To begin looking at the times in which we push it down, or the times in which we say, I want to look good. And I can't look good if I'm in a period of vulnerability. That's not true. That's when you look the most beautiful. And everybody will wrap their arms, in this church, everybody will wrap their arms around you to know that you are on your way up. See, she wrote, she has this story in here, a quote by Theodore Roosevelt. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds should have done them better. The credit is to the man who actually is in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who knows at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly. She said from this quote that she stood, and I want you to get this book, follow along with me, because there's some good stuff in here. She said she came up with 3 truths that are kind of the foundation of her rising life. And when I read them, they became my 3 truths as well. One of them is, I want to be in the arena. I want to be brave. And I want my choice to be brave and to have courage, even when it's hard. She said this, you can't have comfort and courage at the same time. You can have comfort and courage, but you can't have comfort and courage in the same moment. We need to move closer to courage in our life. And being vulnerable is moving closer to courage in our life. The second one is, vulnerable is not a win or lose situation. It's to have the courage to show up when you don't know what the outcome is. And so many of us, and I've done this in my life, we don't like to show up unless we know it's going to be okay. We don't put ourselves out there unless we know we're going to be loved, we're going to be successful, things are going to be all right. But when we don't do that, when we simply show up with courage, and we don't know how it's going to go. Here's an example of how you can do that. Next time you go on a dating site, tell the truth. Tell the truth. You don't know how it's going to come out. And you're going to be vulnerable, and you're going to tell the truth in your life. The next time you're sad, be sad. And it's uncomfortable for us to be sad in the presence of other people. But when it's time for us to be sad, we need to be sad even if it makes them uncomfortable, because that's our vulnerable journey. The third one, and I love this one, is understand that a lot of people in the cheap seats in the arena are filled with people who will never venture out onto the floor. People are in the arena, they went to the arena at least, but they got the cheap seats up top, and they're only going to stand there and yell out things that are mean-spirited to those who are on the floor of the arena. Be careful. Be selective in who you connect with in your life. Be selective about feedback that you allow in your life. If people in the arena, she says this, and I've always said this, I agree with it. If you're not in the arena, you're not kick-ass, and I don't have anything to learn from you. I can love you, but I don't have anything to learn from you. I need people who are going to go out there and dare greatly as well. Who are going to fall down and cry and hurt and share their feelings and then begin the resurrection, begin the journey back up. Now, here's the thing. So far, I've only shared 7 pages of this wisdom with you. So I want you to know you're in for it for at least 3 weeks here. She does a thing that I don't really have time to talk about. I wish I did, but I didn't want to leave today without letting you know what they are. She calls them the law of vulnerable physics. The law of vulnerable physics. And so I'm going to share them with you now. We're going to just run right through them. The first one is, if we are brave enough, often enough, we will fail. This is the physics of vulnerability. Now, we have to be careful in this church because that's not the theology that we teach. You do not have to fail. But if we're all being honest, if we're really going out on a limb where the fruit is, chances are, on occasion, you're going to fail. The second one, whoops, too many clicks. Once we fall in the service of being brave, you can never go back. You can never go back. You might attempt to go near there, but you won't go back exactly there. The third one is, this journey belongs to no one but you. However, nobody successfully goes it alone. Now, a beautiful demonstration of this, if you like movies, a beautiful demonstration of this is a movie called The Way. It was given to me by Gretchen. Gretchen's going to walk from France to Spain on the El Camino Trail, and that's a powerful thing for, she said I could say it, she's in her 70s and she's going to do that, and we all just need to give her a clap. John and I watched it, we started praying for her right away. But here's the thing about the movie. The movie is, if you haven't seen it, Martin Sheen's son decides to go on the Camino Trail, and he dies on the trail. And so Martin Sheen goes there and gets his ashes and begins to do the walk himself, and it's so tender, he spreads some of the ashes along the trail so his son could have taken the trip. And it's beautiful. Now, Martin Sheen was not vulnerable. He didn't want to talk to anybody. He didn't want anybody walking with him. He didn't want to eat his meals with anybody. He didn't want anybody around him. He was grieving, and that's also partially who he was. He hadn't worked on his vulnerability. Well, there were some people, God bless them, who weren't going to take no for an answer. They were going to go with him. They were going to walk with him. They were going to eat with him. They were going to drink wine with him. They were simply going to be with him. And so he'd take off and they'd go right after him. And eventually, through this walk, through this movie, he dropped his guard. And he began to feel that belonging that Brene Brown talks about. That deep connection that she talks about. So much better than if he had walked by himself. The fourth one is, we're wired for story. We're wired for story. Share your story. You have that wired. Creativity embeds knowledge so that it can become practice. We move what we're learning from our heads to our hearts through our hands. There is a tribe in Papua New Guinea that says, knowledge is but a rumor until it goes into your muscles. Knowledge is but a rumor until it gets into your muscles. It gets into your muscles through creativity, and it goes into your heart, and then through your hands. Rising strong is the same process whether you're navigating personal or professional struggles. So this idea that God doesn't care about our little stuff, let it go. The universe responds to your little stuff in the same way it responds to your big stuff. Comparative suffering is a function of fear and scarcity. So the example she uses is, if my parent dies, it's worse than if you become an empty nester. And what that's saying is that love is rationed. Love is not rationed. We have enough love for the empty nester and for the person who is grieving. You can't engineer an emotional, vulnerable, and courageous process into an easy, one-size-fits-all formula. Now, here's the thing about this book, if you choose to go with me this month, and that is, it's not a how-to become more vulnerable. It's a new way of looking at vulnerability. It's a new way of creating consciousness around resurrection and authentic resurrection. Courage is contagious, and you all know that because you've been around people. You know, maybe somebody needed to have a new job, and so they started the process of looking for a job, and then all of a sudden they were saying bye-bye to you, and you're still in the office and they're saying bye-bye but then you got their courage, you got their contagiousness. You said, well, if they can do it, maybe I can do it as well. Rising strong is a spiritual practice. Rising strong is a spiritual practice. I say this all the time. Spiritual practice is so much more than praying and meditating. It is learning these new ways of being in our life. I hope you keep coming for the whole series. And then at the end of the month, I have a surprise for you. Do you know how good that guy was last week? Was he fabulous or what? Yeah. The end of this month, I've got a speaker coming. If you miss it, you're just going to kick yourself all over Sacramento. Reverend Deborah Johnson will be here, and she is phenomenal. Yeah. So we are a tithing church. You know that. We ask you to tithe, and we don't do anything. We don't ask you to do anything we're not doing. And so we tithe a portion of your gift for us every month. And this month we're looking at a group called BEST. And so I'll ask Aisha to come up and accept the check and share what we're doing.
Good day. I know it sounded like she said Aisha, but my name is really Kairos. Hi. Thank you guys so much for considering the BEST program, for considering children in Oak Park. I don't know how much you know about the organization. We're about this big. There's one lady who's 70 who runs all over Sacramento gathering everything, and the rest of us board members are just trying to keep up with her. But there is a crisis in Oak Park, especially with the young men who are falling in the streets to violence, to drugs, to not having very many options other than gang participation, negative encounters with law enforcement, all of the things that not having enough resources can force on you. And BEST tries very hard to be another option, a plan C. And so we take these young people, these 12 to 18-year-olds around the neighborhood, and they fix stuff. They fix fences, they fix gardens, they paint houses, they get real-world job experience. They have workshops after lunch. They are in a position working those few days, those few hours in the mornings in the summer to be valued by their neighborhood. A neighborhood that might otherwise be afraid of them, a neighborhood that might otherwise reject them. So yes, you guys are changing lives, but you are saving lives. So thank you.
Doing God's work. You will take your gift in your hand and repeat after me. Money is God in action. I send it forth to bless and to prosper. All who come in contact with it.